Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the full council at the London Borough of Hillingdon. This virtual meeting is also being broadcast simultaneously on the council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon London. And I would like to welcome all those members of the public who are joining us via that medium. My name is Councillor Teji Barnes, Mayor of Hillingdon, and as Mayor, I will be chairing the meeting. I have alongside me at a safe distance the Head of Democratic Services, Lloyd White. The rest of the members of the council are joining us from home, including the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Shamdell. You are all very welcome. You may have noted from the agenda that we will shortly be conducting a roll call. Please refer to your agenda and order of business throughout the meeting, as it will help guide you through the business tonight. Before we start, I would like to emphasise some important online housekeeping rules for everyone present. They are to remind everyone to please ensure any mobile phones around you are on silent, to please keep your microphone muted when not speaking, and then unmute to speak, only if called upon by myself or the Head of Democratic Services. Just imagine we are all in the council chamber. The same rules apply. That only one person should speak at a time. That the Code of Conduct rules apply equally to this virtual meeting as to when we meet in person. I expect an immaculate standard of behaviour. That if you are speaking tonight, and you should have already indicated to the Head of Democratic Services that you wish to do so, please keep it brief and to the point. The traditional timer is in operation at this end, and I will be reminding you when your time is almost up. In terms of technical meeting control, if a councillor leaves the virtual meeting partway through for a period of time, for example, lost connection, I will continue the meeting unless we are not quorate, which is 17 councillors. I will now move to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence, and ask the Head of Democratic Services to read out any apologies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening to you all councillors. I have just one apology tonight, that of Councillor Prince.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, the minutes. You would have received the minutes for the meeting held on the 16th of July 2020. I shall take it that they are approved unless any member indicates otherwise. Agenda item 3, roll call and declarations of interest. The Head of Democratic Services, Lloyd White, will now call on all members, as you are now familiar with, in alphabetical order for the roll call and declarations of interest. Lloyd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, good evening again. So I will call each member in order and ask you to unmute, state that you are present, and state if you have any declarations of interest to declare. If you don't have any, you don't need to speak on that at all. Just state that you are present, and then may I remind you to mute again afterwards. So, Councillor Ahmad Walana.
Good evening, everybody. Lloyd, I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen. Not hearing Councillor Allen. I'll have to come back to that. Councillor Arnold. Oh, thank you, Councillor Allen.
Sorry.
Councillor Arnold.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Bianco.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Birra.
Good evening, Lloyd and everyone. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Bliss.
I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Bridges.
Good evening, I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Brightman.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Burrows.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Chapman.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chubadar.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Lloyd. I'm present.
Good evening. Councillor Cawthorne.
Present, Lloyd. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Curling.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present. I also have a non-pecuniary interest to declare on motion 8.1, as one of the names on the plaque shown in the council agenda is my great uncle.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curling. Councillor Dennis.
Good evening, everybody, and I am present.
Thank you. Councillor DeVille.
Evening, everyone. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Dillon. Councillor Dillon.
Good evening, Lloyd. Good evening, everybody. I am present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Dott.
Good evening, everyone. I'm present here.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Good evening, Lloyd and everyone. Yes, I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Good evening, everybody. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Edgington.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Farley.
Good evening. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fife. Councillor Fife, I can actually see that you're present, so thank you so much.
I am present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gardner.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goddard.
Hello, everyone. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Graham. Councillor Graham. Okay, I'll come back and try Councillor Graham again in a minute. Councillor Hagger.
Good evening. I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Hensley.
Good evening, Lloyd, and I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Higgins.
Good evening, Lloyd, and everybody. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Horangi.
Present, Lloyd.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Lakmana.
Good evening, all. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Lavery.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lewis.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Makwana.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you very much. Councillor Markham.
Present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mathers.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Melvin.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Milani.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas Mills.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Mills.
Evening, Lloyd. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Money.
Evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Morse.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nelson. Councillor Nelson.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor O'Brien.
Evening, Lloyd. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Oswell.
Good evening, Lloyd. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Good evening, Lloyd. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Sir Ray Puddifoot.
Good evening, Lloyd. Good evening, everybody. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Radia.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
Good evening, Lloyd, and everybody. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Rodrigues.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Sansapuri. Councillor Sansapuri. Okay, we'll have to come back to Councillor Sansapuri. Councillor Seaman Digby.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons. Councillor Simmons. Come back to that. Councillor Singh.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Stead. Councillor Stead. Councillor Sullivan.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Sweeting.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Tuckwell.
Good evening. I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Yarrow.
Good evening, Lloyd. Present.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Good evening, Lloyd. Good evening, everybody. I am present.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor. Thank you. I'll just go back over the three who didn't answer. Councillor Graham, I can see you. So I'm going to say you're present. Councillor Sansapuri, are you there? Not got Councillor Sansapuri. And Councillor Stead. Not got Councillor Stead. And I can see Councillor Simmons now.
Yes. Good evening, Lloyd.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Simmons. Also, councillors, I'd just like to confirm the officers present this evening are the Chief Executive, the Deputy Chief Executive and Corporate Director of Resident Services, the Corporate Director of Finance, the Corporate Director of Social Care, myself, Raj Allah, Nikki O'Halloran, Mark Braddock, Morgan Einan and Beth Rainey. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 4, report from Democratic Services. Part 1, the temporary suspension of the council procedure rules for the current virtual council meeting only. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are actually 3 parts to this report, and I'll move them individually. The first part of the report requests temporary suspension of council procedure rules to facilitate the current council meeting in a virtual format. The proposed change of rules relates only to this council meeting, and with the exception of now allowing up to 2 speakers on a motion rather than 1, is as agreed at our last virtual council meeting. I move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second and reserve my right.
As there are no other speakers notified, I will assume the recommendation is approved unless any member indicates that they wish to vote against. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The second part of the report provides details of decisions made using urgency procedures since the last virtual meeting of Council on 16th of July. The decisions are as recorded in the report. I move that these decisions are noted. The final part of the report requests an amendment to the Council scheme of delegations to facilitate appropriate member oversight of planning decisions which have 42-day or 56-day prior approval constraints. The amendments are as detailed in the report and follow discussions and agreement between the Leader of the Opposition and myself. I move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bianco.
And I second the recommendation and reserve my right.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, you are down to speak on this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I simply wanted to thank the administration and officers for bringing this matter forward. It's part of legislation relating to 5G masts. We've had a plethora of applications. Residents are very concerned about them. Some of them are very unsightly. They're very high. They're being located or proposed to be located, sometimes in highly residential suburban areas. And this has given rise to a lot of objection. If we don't make a decision at committee or by delegation, then by default they are approved. So I very much welcome this because it does enable us to adequately control this process, particularly in relation to these masts, which seem to be the ones giving rise to most concern. So we very much welcome this and thank you for it.
Thank you. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think before we go on, I should let you know the correct form of address is Surrey. Nothing to add, Madam Mayor. I think we should move to the vote.
Thank you. So we now will move to the vote. So the Leader of the Council, Councillor Surrey Puddifoot, on behalf of the Conservative Group, do you approve the motion?
I do, Madam Mayor.
Leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Curling, on behalf of the Labour Group, do you approve the motion?
I do, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. If there are any members who wish to vote differently to that indicated by their group leader, please indicate now verbally or via virtual chat. That motion has been carried. We will now move to the Head of Democratic Services.
I just wanted to come in, thank you, Madam Mayor, just wanted to come in and say that Councillor Sansapori and Councillor Stead have both now joined the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, my announcements. I would like to start with a huge congratulations to the Leader of the Council on receiving the great honour of a knighthood conferred to him last month. Councillor Teji Puddifoot, MBE, well done and congratulations on your knighthood and the successful 20 years as the leader of Hillingdon Council. My next piece of news is to say that the Mayoralty has finally started to see some activity outside the parlour. I have had the opportunity to attend events in Hayes, West Drayton, Northwood, Eastcote and Uxbridge. It is so uplifting to see that some charities, organisations and groups that are trying to establish themselves after the last few months are taking steps to reignite their presence, albeit baby steps. However, it is clear when looking at the diary for the next few months that our community is still apprehensive about creating physical meets or unable to due to the restrictions. One of the ideas that will help connect with so many areas and groups in the borough is my YouTube channel that was set up recently. From this month, I shall be uploading a weekly vlog with various themes and also live streaming certain videos that will require interaction from the viewers that are logged on. It is a platform that needs to be encouraged to stay hand in hand with the Mayoralty, as we know nothing will ever go back to what it was before the pandemic. My channel is aptly named the Mayor of Hillingdon. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. Item 2, I call upon Councillor Teji Puddifoot as Leader of the Council. Could you make a statement in order to update all members on the Council's ongoing response to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your kind comments in your announcements. Madam Mayor, the London Borough of Hillingdon has continued to deliver services to our residents since the start of the COVID pandemic, and we continue to receive the thanks of our residents for the performance of our staff in many areas of service delivery. As I stated at the last council meeting, our ability to manage finance and business process provided a firm base to enable us to deal with the pandemic at council level, and that continues to be the case. There was no cabinet meeting in August, and accordingly no update on our financial position was published. However, I can inform members that we currently estimate the cost of the COVID-19 pandemic to the council to be £28.3 million in the current financial year. After deducting government grants received and anticipated, we have a financial pressure of £4.2 million. Whilst it is expected that we will receive further government funding, we have put aside £9.1 million in earmarked reserves to cover any shortfall. Normal activity in the first 3 months of the financial year showed Hillingdon operating at £381,000 under budget, with year-end balances anticipated to be over £28 million. Accordingly, there will be no financial problems in the current year due to our level of balances and earmarked reserves. We will, over the coming months, be reviewing our medium-term financial forecast to plan appropriately for the coming years. For the avoidance of doubt, I do not anticipate any reduction in service delivery. Since the start of the pandemic, registered COVID deaths in Hillingdon have totalled 591 as at 20th of August. And in due course, the council will provide a suitable memorial for our residents who have passed away due to COVID-19. Many staff and residents have and continue to go the extra mile to provide services and assistance to our residents, and we will be formally recognising these unsung heroes, both residents and staff. Our Deputy Chief Executive, Jean Palmer, is retiring in the coming months. She has been the main driver of resident service delivery in Hillingdon for many years, but particularly in the past 6 months COVID times. Accordingly, it is our intention to award her Freedom of the Borough following her retirement. It is hoped to be able to do this at a council meeting next year. Whilst other regions of the country are now exceeding London as regards new COVID-19 cases, and Hillingdon has been returning low new case numbers compared to many other London boroughs, in recent weeks we have seen an upward movement. We cannot, as a council or as a community, become complacent, and we must all continue to follow government guidance. Accordingly, we will continue to put the health and well-being of our residents at the forefront of what we do. And again, as I said at the last council meeting, it is important that we continue to recognise the severity of the current situation and refrain from the traditional knockabout activities and campaigns, and concentrate on all the council's efforts on dealing with COVID-19 and its consequences for all of our residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We shall move to agenda item 6. The proposed and revised Article 4 directions to protect employment land in the London Borough of Hillingdon. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the 2nd of September, the council leader and myself recommended to council to propose and revise Article 4 direction to protect employment land in our borough. The reason behind this is due to changes to planning regulations, which I'm sure many of us are aware of, which would allow for some offices and light industrial buildings with current protected employment areas to be replaced or extended by residential uses without any planning permission. This would totally undermine the remaining employment function of these areas. Recommendations will enable this council to determine whether an Article 4 should be created. I hope through this report, councillors can see that this will enable the council to maintain the right amount of employment space to ensure we maintain a prosperous borough. It really is not considered that this will be to the detriment of those residents who would favour additional housing, as we will meet our targets through allocated housing sites. Hillingdon has approximately 350 hectares of employment land, and we must protect it. The maps within the report show where these are within our borough. As this requires full council approval, I move the 2 recommendations on page 15 and hope all councillors support the approach of this application to the Secretary of State. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery.
Madam Mayor, I formally second and reserve my right.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We in the Labour group very much welcome this Article 4. I think those of us who sit on planning committees have viewed with concern the loss of office buildings and employment buildings, some of them of some size. For example, the Rank Xerox Tower at the end of Uxbridge at the western end, and the office buildings behind that have all received prior approval permissions for residential. So large areas, large floor spaces of employment land have already been lost to the borough. So we very much welcome this. And I know it takes a year for this to become effective, but I would like to thank officers for responding so promptly to this and getting all the documentation in place to come to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I ran into the previous Article 4 in a recent meeting on about the 16th of August, and I observed that we put the restrictions on B1C and not B1A. This Article 4 is substantial, and it's a substantial improvement on the previous Article 4 we had. And from the Labour point of view, we actually strongly support what has taken place. And if you look at it, the vacancy level is at 7%, and the balance of supply and demand for commercial activity. I think there's a strong case for this actually being accepted by the government, and I think we have to emphasise our strong approval of what Planning Department was doing, and I would strongly praise the Planning Department. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery, you reserved your right earlier. Would you like to speak now?
Madam Mayor, no, thank you.
Councillor Burrows.
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to say I'm pleased that all councillors are going to support this. it did come, and officers have worked extremely hard on this. So my thanks also as the Cabinet lead for planning goes to all officers that have worked tirelessly to get these documents together. Would add working tirelessly to the other parts of the white paper and other parts of planning legislation that's coming through. So Madam Mayor, I'm happy to go to the vote.
Thank you. So we will go to the vote now for the motion on agenda item 6. Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot, on behalf of the Conservative Group, do you approve the motion?
I do, Madam Mayor.
Leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Curling, on behalf of the Labour Group, do you approve the motion?
I do, Madam Mayor.
If there are any members who wish to vote differently to that indicated by their group leader, please indicate now verbally or via the chat. The motion has been carried. Agenda item 7, questions from members. We're going to start with Councillor Sullivan. Please present your question 7.4. Could you please make sure you read out your entire question? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Would the Cabinet member update members on the performance of the waste and recycling team during the lockdown period and since restrictions have eased? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And firstly, congratulations to Councillor Sullivan on your first contribution to a full council meeting, albeit a virtual one. It gets better, I can assure you. And thank you for your question too. I'm aware of the informed interest you take in waste, refuse and recycling services. I'm conscious as well that your first few months as a councillor has coincided with lockdown. Now, over the last few months, Hillingdon, unlike many other authorities, has managed to maintain all weekly waste and recycling services. This was despite a large increase in tonnages across the entire service. Garden and food waste at the height of lockdown increased by 37%, and both waste and recycling also increased by 12% and 11% respectively. However, remarkably during the pandemic, the overall sickness level actually fell from that of the previous year. This was down to two main factors. The first being the commitment to the service by our frontline staff, and the second was the introduction of minibus services to support the waste team and make sure that social distancing guidelines were able to be observed while staff carried out the full range of duties. Now, this new method of working was incredibly popular both with staff and our residents, and the waste team received many cards of thanks left on waste bags, along with tins of biscuits and sweets. We also received many letters of thanks and emails from residents expressing their thanks to the waste team. And there were some delightful scenes across the borough as crews were often welcomed with residents applauding when they arrived. In Northwood, the residents of Elgood Avenue actually held a tea stand for all the 3 waste collection teams to show their thanks for their continued support of their weekly services. At our New Year's Green Lane site, we reopened a week before all other West London authorities back in May, and with other partners such as traffic management, made sure our residents could dispose of their waste as quickly and safely as possible. Again, we received many compliments for the site and the way it was operated during lockdown. Since restrictions have eased, we are still experiencing a high level of demand at New Year's Green Lane. Unlike our surrounding neighbours, Hillingdon has opted not to introduce a booking system for our site, making disposal of household waste as easy as possible for our residents. And meanwhile, trade income at the site is also increasing. And at the same time, our commercial waste has seen few cancellations from customers, and we are receiving new inquiries for trade collections all the time. Meanwhile, many residents still work from home, and the overall waste tonnage across all streams is still around 5% higher than normal. However, this increase is being managed within our normal resources. And needless to say, Cotton face masks have been issued to all staff, and ongoing washing of hands and cleaning of vehicles is enabling our services to continue to function. Madam Mayor, there is no doubt that we are blessed with an extraordinarily committed group of people delivering these services, which are highly valued and indeed cherished among our residents, and never more so during the lockdown period, as we've all seen. I'd like to place on record my thanks to them on behalf of us all. And finally, if you'll indulge me for a moment, Madam Mayor, I would just draw members' attention to the two-page spread in the latest Hillingdon People, setting out our comprehensive recycling offer and promoting participation in food waste recycling to build on the success of the last few months, with significant benefits in reducing landfill costs and harmful emissions, consistent with our emerging climate strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, do you have a supplementary question for the Cabinet member?
No, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Duncan, please present question 7.1.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the council meeting of 4th of July 2019, I asked the leader of the council why Hillingdon had bought Packet Boat House, building with known dangerous defects that had been made known to the leader and officers whilst under construction and before council purchase. After the council bought the building and used it to house first-time buyers, all residents had to be moved out for safety reasons while still having to pay their mortgages, and the council was involved in legal action against the seller of the building. Will the leader now update us and residents on the outcome of the legal action, what the current position is, and how soon residents may be able to return to their homes? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Duncan, for the question. Let me start by restating some of what I said to you last year. In July 2015, Paradigm Housing Group were building Packet Boat House, a 41-unit housing development, for which they'd received a grant funding from the GLA to deliver 30 units at affordable rent tenure. Following the announcement by the Chancellor of the Exchequer of the intention to reduce registered provider social housing rents for a period of 4 years, Paradigm decided to halt all new projects and review their development programme. In August 2015, Paradigm notified both the Council and the GLA of their intention to return the grant for this scheme and market the site privately. At the time, the Council asked to be given first refusal on the property, as the loss of these programme units would have had a severe impact on the affordable housing projections for that year. Paradigm owned the site and agreed the sale of the freehold of Packet Boat House and a 999-year lease on the associated parking area in a turnkey package that included white goods and carpeting for all the flats for the sum of £10.3 million. Paradigm were of course free to seek the highest possible receipt, and if Hillingdon had not acted to acquire the site, it would have been purchased by another London borough, who then, as now, are seeking to move households to Hillingdon from inner London boroughs. The decision to purchase Packet Boat House as a complete ready-to-occupy unit was taken by Cabinet in November 2015, and it was anticipated that the sale would be legally completed by the 31st of March 2016. In February 2016, Paradigm informed the Council that they'd received allegations about the quality of the building, that they were investigating these allegations, and were necessary, they were appointing external consultants to verify that the building met the relevant standards. As part of the Council's due diligence investigations at this time, independent surveyors were appointed to undertake a Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors survey of the building, and they did identify issues which were more than minor snagging issues, full details of which were shared with Paradigm. An undertaking was received from their managing director that they remained committed to ensuring that the contractor would undertake whatever works were needed to bring the building up to the required standard. In order to enable the Council to utilise £1.5 million of right-to-buy receipts, the contract for purchase had to be exchanged by 31st of March, and this was done, but with a delayed completion date of September 2016. In July 2016, Paradigm advised the Council that the defect rectification was ahead of schedule. However, at a site visit in August, Council officers expressed concern relating to the progress and quality, and Paradigm advised that they were having difficulty with a contractor, but they were confident that all works would be properly completed by the 31st of December, and that they had engaged with other contractors who were on standby should their contractor fail to perform. Notwithstanding this, the council said that we would not be held to the September date and extended the contract completion to 30th of November. The sale completed on the 30th of November 2016, supported by the following documentation: building control certification, practical completion certification, planning condition sign-offs, Premier Housing 10-year social housing warranties, health and safety files providing warranties for fixtures and fittings. The independent surveyors engaged by the council as part of the due diligence investigations confirmed prior to completion that all critical matters have been satisfactorily completed, and whilst identifying a few minor defects for which a retention of £69,000 would be held, there was no reason that the purchase should not be completed. In December 2016, the council identified some minor issues whilst undertaking a fire risk assessment, and these were competently dealt with in January 2017, but whilst on site, the contractor that we had engaged identified that the fire doors had not been installed in line with the manufacturer's recommendations. Paradigm tried but failed to get this matter resolved. And for the absolute avoidance of doubt, given the importance of this issue, the council had all the fire doors replaced and are pursuing Paradigm for the cost of this. The first tenants moved in during June 2017, and sales of the shared ownership of flats began at that time. A year later, in June 2018, a routine repair to a leak under a bath in a flat uncovered further fire stopping issues, and the necessary corrective work, as well as further investigative work that was agreed by the London Fire Brigade. At this time, the council set up a 24-hour fire warden service whilst the investigation was being carried out. Between July and November, the flat was completely stripped back and further fire stopping and quality issues were found. During this period, Paradigm was stating that they had no obligation to deal with these defects, and whilst that will be a matter for litigation, the safety of residents in the property was the most important factor. Based on the new safety concerns, the council invited the fire brigade to attend a meeting, and it was jointly agreed that we should decant the building in December 2018 in order to ensure that the building is cleared of any substantial defects and remove all risks to residents. During the decant period, our housing officers are providing an excellent service to ensure that all tenants are looked after and fully informed of step-by-step actions being taken to ensure they return to a safe property. Officers have also advised Paradigm Housing that they should undertake intrusive building surveys of any building built and managed by their packet boat project team during the period 2014 to 2017 to ensure that their residents are safe. Councillor Duncan, whilst it is true to say that officers of this council were aware of various issues with this building and took appropriate action at the time, it was not true to say, as you were indicating last year, that they were aware of shoddy and dangerous build at the time of exchange of contracts in March 16. The responsibility for the issues of this building rests with Paradigm and the building contractor, not the staff of the council. Now, to summarise and update members, the purchase of Packet Boat House was approved as it was considered good value and intended to supplement affordable housing supply in the borough and enhance the financial strength of the council's HRA. The property was purchased from Paradigm in good faith, and all the standard certification and warranties were provided for the property. Relevant surveys were also undertaken. Unfortunately, we were missold the property because once residents moved in, it became apparent things were covered up and faults were uncovered. All the residents, tenants and homeowners were moved out for their safety so that remedial works could be undertaken. Offers to buy back the shared ownership properties at a premium were made to all the homeowners, but only 2 accepted the buyback offer. The alternate offer, preferred and accepted by the majority, was to continue to pay their mortgage and move to interim private accommodation paid for by the council whilst remedial works are undertaken. These works are well underway, although undoubtedly upset by the COVID situation, and programmed to be completed in November. As you would expect, we are taking full legal action against Paradigm Housing. External legal services were engaged in July 2018. To date, we've been finalising the works packages and concluding the value of the claim to ensure we recover as much as possible. The final claim papers were issued to the Premier Insurance, who provides a building insurance cover sold to LBH with the building, on the 8th of August, and we are expecting insurers to respond by the end of this month. The council has set out in detail the full extent of its claim to Paradigm, and the two parties have agreed to mediation, which is scheduled to take place on the 27th of October. The purpose of the mediation is to see whether agreement can be reached on a settlement without the need for expensive and protracted court proceedings. However, if an acceptable agreement cannot be reached, the council will not hesitate to bring a significant claim against Paradigm in the courts and seek to recover all of its legal costs. It would be unadvisable, I'm told, to say anything further at this stage, as the council needs to be careful not to prejudice the mediation in any way. For the avoidance of doubt, we will not accept that the council staff were negligent or at fault, and that whilst we are taking the appropriate action against Paradigm, the safety of our residents was and remains our main concern. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, do you have a supplementary question for the Leader of the Council?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I did actually receive information anonymously about some of the defects, which I did pass on. I'm not blaming officers. I did pass it on, but unfortunately at that time it wasn't pursued, as I believe the leader is aware. My main concern now is to understand that the building has been made safe for all those people who will be returning to it. And I believe that hopefully they will be able to return to their homes before Christmas, but obviously no guarantees can be given while there's such extensive work. I do understand that, but I would like to know, that it is safe, which is the main concern that I think we all had. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Saray Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Duncan. You're absolutely right. You did receive these tip-offs, and we did take that up with Paradigm, but as I was saying in my answer, they were denying that there was an issue. They later on accepted there was an issue and that the contractor would put it right. I don't know why we were able to receive all those certificates that come with new build and everything was supposed to be okay, and a chartered surveyor said everything was okay. It obviously wasn't, but again, you are right, the safety of the residents is paramount, and this will not cost them anything. It will cost Paradigm, who have obviously engaged a contractor who hasn't delivered, and the concern is at this stage for our own residents, but also, as we did indicate to Paradigm at the time, please check any other developments anywhere that this contractor was engaged in. But yes, we hope to have all those residents back by December, but they will only be back once we're absolutely sure that that property is safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bridges, please present question 7.2.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could the Cabinet member please provide members with an update on the position of schools reopening this month?
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bridges, for your question. I'm delighted to inform Council that Hillingdon schools are open for business. Thanks to support from the Council, as of the 7th of September, every Hillingdon school welcomed back its students, including special schools. Many schools have been in communication with parents prior to the summer break and throughout summer to offer support to all students to prepare them for returning to school. To ensure all returning students are as safe as possible, all schools have completed a risk assessment in line with government guidelines and put in place a range of protective measures to prevent and control the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Some of the interventions that schools have introduced include painted distance markers provided by the Council at school entrances, frequent cleaning regimes, revising the timetabling of the school day to prevent different class groups from mixing, staggered start and finish times, and phased return to ensure that new distancing and hygiene practices are embedded. Travel arrangements to and from school have also been revised, and encouragement for students and parents to walk, cycle or scoot, that's obviously for the children, not the adults, to school where possible to avoid the need to travel on public transport. Additional school route buses have been provided at peak times to alleviate the pressure on local transport networks. And I think we're safe to say that we're all monitoring and watching that to see how that goes. For children with additional needs, school transport arrangements have been checked and updated to ensure students can travel safely to and from school. And special schools have introduced for some of their students with more complex needs a phased return to ensure that they will be safe in their educational environment. Throughout lockdown, our special education team have been holding fortnightly SEN forums with parents, carers and relevant organisations, providing information and a point of communication. And this has worked so well that it will continue moving forwards. Student attendance at school is being monitored on a daily basis and remains strong at almost pre-COVID-19 levels. During the pandemic, the Council has supported schools with timely information and advice and have provided a named linked officer for all schools. The Council will continue to support schools and parents, and parents can be confident that their children are in safe hands. Madam Mayor, we will continue to monitor the position closely, but as I said earlier, in Hillingdon, schools are back and open for business, and I'm very pleased with the positive comments that we have received from schools with regards our Officers Assistance Programme. I'd like to take this opportunity to place on record my thanks to all staff in the Council's education team who have, throughout the whole of the pandemic, been reactive, proactive and wholeheartedly active. We are very fortunate to have such a diligent, professional team who have ensured our young residents that they can return to learning safely. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bridges, do you have a supplementary question for the Cabinet member?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I thank the Cabinet member for her response.
Councillor Edwards, please present question 7.3.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Would the Cabinet Member for Social Care, Health and Wellbeing please advise us on the performance of our social care and domestic abuse services during the pandemic? Thank you.
Councillor Palmer.
Beg your pardon, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Edwards, for your question. Before answering, I'd like to pay tribute to the wonderful staff we have in both our social care and our domestic abuse services. Both groups of staff have performed with outstanding commitment during this pandemic and are a credit to Hillingdon Council. Turning to social care first, in keeping with the issued guidance, the majority of adult social work staff work remotely from late March through to July. However, a core group of social workers and managers remained at the Civic Centre throughout to work alongside colleagues from other departments, including the Contact Centre and the Quality Assurance team. Whether social workers have been working remotely or office-based, service delivery has been maintained throughout. This has been aided by consistently high levels of staff availability. The Coronavirus Act 2020 introduced the concept of Care Act easements, which allowed local authorities to vary certain statutory duties to ensure essential service delivery. I am delighted to report that thanks to the dedication of our staff, the London Borough of Hillingdon has not needed to utilise these powers, as adult social work have continued to provide their full range of statutory services throughout the pandemic, including issuing deprivation of liberty orders, undertaking safeguarding adult inquiries, making representation to the Court of Protection, Mental Health Act assessments, arranging and reviewing care and support, and assisting with new ways of working in relation to hospital discharge. Early in the pandemic, there was a marked increase in care management referrals, primarily driven by residents requiring alternatives to day centre social provision and changes to the availability of carers. More recently, the increased areas of demand are safeguarding adults and mental health assessments. There are 48 registered care homes offering 1,486 beds in Hillingdon. 1,337 of these are for older people and 149 are for people with a learning disability or mental health problem. To support hospital discharges and care homes in managing infection control, 18 flats in a council-owned extra care sheltered housing scheme were made available for use as step down for both people with and without a COVID-19 diagnosis. Additionally, a 9-bed council-owned residential respite scheme was also temporarily repurposed from April until the end of June for use as step down for COVID positive people. Both facilities have supported people for whom it may not be appropriate for them to return to the care home setting. To date, 31 residents have used these services. During the COVID pandemic, London Borough of Hillingdon has fully supported our providers, and Hillingdon Social Care was the first in London to reach out and offer practical and financial support to care providers. And I'm delighted to say we have received a number of compliments from them. Additionally, Adult Social Care has continued to provide services throughout and has not needed to make any use of the guidance which relaxes statutory requirements, and in turn reduce service levels, which is a credit to the Council's senior management, the Director of Adult Care and our frontline staff. Madam Mayor, if I may now turn to the Council's domestic abuse services. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Council has continued to provide rapid response services to victims of domestic abuse to keep them and their families safe from harm. Commission granted, funded and other voluntary sector services have remained fully operational during the height of the lockdown period and the period that has followed. This includes the Hillingdon IDFA service, the Domestic Abuse MARAC for high-risk cases, and the Council's Children's Services multi-agency safeguarding hubs. Helplines have remained fully open for victims, as have arrangements to make the homes of victims safer through the installation of safety measures. There has been a notable increase in victims of domestic abuse reporting concerns during the period of lockdown. The number of domestic abuse incidents reported to the police has increased by 14 additional incidents per month. An 8% increase in referrals to the Hillingdon Independent Domestic Violence Service, 188 high-risk domestic abuse referrals were received from April to the 30th of June. A 15% increase in referrals to the MARAC, with 150 referrals of high-risk cases. 37% increase in police Merlin safeguarding reports, along with 737 referrals from the 1st of March to the 30th of June. In addition, 48 council tenants have required support and assistance, which is a rise of 117%. 89 tenants were supported in the period the 1st of April to August, compared to 41 during the same period. Madam Mayor, I am particularly proud of the way Hillingdon officers have worked with the police and other partners in commissioning a Crime Stoppers communication campaign, the only borough in London to do so during this pandemic. This was operational from May to July. The online material was viewed more than 5 million times. Yes, 5 million times. The total estimated reach of the outdoor campaign was over 982,000 people. This council will never let up in its support for the victims of the abhorrent domestic abuse, and I would like to place on record my thanks to Councillor Janet Gardner for her excellent work and commitment to our cause, and also my thanks for the work of Jackie Robertson and Jerry Campbell, whose commitment to this cause plays a huge role in keeping our most vulnerable residents safe from harm. I understand this is a very long answer, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your time. If anybody has any questions for me following this meeting, please, the best thing to do is to email me and I will answer. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for Councillor Edwards for asking the question.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards, do you have a supplementary question for the Cabinet member?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We are now going to move on to agenda item 8. Motions. Motion 8.1. Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All members of this council will have seen the photograph of the plaque within St Martin's Church, West Drayton, which lists the 41 men who gave their lives for our country in the Great War, a war which was supposed to have ended all wars. These men went forth from West Drayton, never to return. Amongst those listed, there is one who failed to reach his 17th birthday and who died of his wounds while serving on HMS Vivid, and whose grave is within the churchyard of St Martin's. It is a churchyard which has been recognised by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission as one where there are many graves of the fallen from that war. On the 100th anniversary of the start of the Great War, and to recognise the sacrifice of all from this borough who died in that war, our council, in our name, compiled a book of remembrance entitled "We Will Remember Them." It was a book which was given to the families of those long dead men, and it was reported in the pages of Hillingdon People as late as November 2018 that it, and I quote, included all, and I repeat all, Hillingdon residents who lost their lives during the Great War and are listed on one of the memorials and plaques across the borough, end quote. Unfortunately, the St Martin's plaque was admitted, an error accepted by the council in 2014. But still the names were not included in the only book which this council published to remember the dead of the Great War. Therefore, I ask on behalf of the forgotten 41, the Reverend Rosie Barry, Vicar of St Martin's, the congregation of St Martin's Church and the people of West Drayton, that this council produces an addendum to its official book of remembrance, and that a picture of the plaque and the details of all those listed on it are placed within its pages, so that the fallen of West Drayton are at last reunited with their comrades. Hopefully it may be possible for a picture of the plaque to be included in an edition of Hillingdon People, as we are so close to that time in November when our nation remembers this country's war dead from all conflicts, including those men listed on the St Martin's plaque. This plaque was unfortunately also omitted from all other council records, including the Gazetteer of War Memorials in the borough of Hillingdon, until the plaque's existence was at last recognised by Cabinet in 2018, although it had been brought to the notice of all members in a meeting of council some 3 years earlier by Councillor Janet Duncan and by a local historian in 2014. However, although the omission was known, the commemorative book was not updated. So the war dead of West Drayton have still not been reunited with their fallen comrades. Unfortunately, the plaque is still not listed with all other Hillingdon war memorials on page 9 of the updated Gazetteer, although a picture of it is at last on the council's website. We can all play our part this evening in completing the council's book of remembrance by correcting this omission, so that these long dead men who went to war for our country are not forgotten for us, whose role it is to ensure that their sacrifice is properly remembered. Lest we forget, for as the commemorative book title says, we will remember them. Please support the motion. I thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mathers.
Madam Mayor, I believe it's important that we hear the wording of this motion to really understand the gravity, as Jan has just illustrated, at full council this evening. And that motion is that council recognises the sacrifice of all from this borough who have died in the Great War and who are listed on the memorials and church plaques across the borough by completing the council's book of remembrance entitled "We Will Remember Them." This is to be accomplished by including in the commemorative book those men who died in that war and whose names are listed in the plaque at St Martin's, West Drayton. This is achieved by way of an addendum to the Book of Remembrance, which will then be printed and publicised. These local men who fought and died for their country have up to now been forgotten by this council, as this plaque, which records their names, has been completely omitted from the only book published by Hillingdon Council to remember its war dead from the Great War. We, the living, can correct that and make true the words, lest we forget. This is an opportunity for all councils across the chamber, the virtual chamber, of this council to unite and work together to quickly review and resolve any omissions to all of our local public records. We have a role as councillors, I believe, to preserve, protect and promote the heritage of all of our residents in this borough. And we should also correctly remember those who have died to correct our freedoms. And with that, Madam Mayor, I second this motion and urge all to vote for it unamended.
Thank you. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the amendment states, this administration does have an enviable record of protecting and promoting heritage in Hillingdon, particularly military history. No one can doubt that. For the reasons I gave in my leader's statement, we would not at this time be promoting that sort of thing at a council meeting. However, as this particular issue has been raised by Councillor Sweeting, a full and comprehensive response will be provided, which is something that I cannot achieve in the time available to me tonight in a motion. I will, however, comment further at the end of this debate. I move the amendment.
Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second and reserve my right.
We will now be debating on the amendment. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In 2014, I put a motion to Council asking for a more accurate recording by the Council of West Drayton men who had died in the Great War, and indeed for all the West Drayton Great War dead to be included in the Council's Book of Remembrance entitled We Will Remember Them, as they had all been forgotten and none of their names were in the book. I withdrew my motion on the understanding from the leader that these names would be recorded correctly. However, the following year, it was necessary to put the motion again, as nothing had been done. The response I received then was that if any descendant relatives of the men killed during the war applied to the council, their names would be considered. This was not a response to be proud of. Did men who a century ago gave their lives for their country deserve such treatment? No, not in my book. A local historian has done extensive work on researching information on all those men who died in the First World War. This information is available and does not require the council to do anything other than check it. The plaque in St Martin's Church is a record of most of them and accepted by the War Graves Commission, so surely needs no further validation. Although this motion is about those who died from West Drayton, there are several other memorials to the Great War dead that are not included in the book. We will remember them. If the administration is going to take this back to Cabinet, and I hope it will, for a report, then I would ask that all other omissions be investigated and recorded properly, including the records in other parts of the borough. I had hoped that this would be a non-political motion, and I'm therefore sorry that the Conservative group felt it necessary to put in an amendment that contains such self-congratulatory words about their enviable record, particularly in military history, when it is clear from the facts regarding West Drayton that this is not justified, and there is, on the contrary, an unenviable record of neglect and omission since 2014. Patting yourself on the back for an incomplete job does not encourage others to believe you and is in very poor taste when we are talking about remembering the lives of men lost in a horrific battle and war. I hope we can all recognise the facts here. An omission was made. It's been identified. Let us just correct this and put the record straight for those who died and all future generations to remember. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bianco, you reserved your right earlier. You can now speak.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. Not necessary.
Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is with a sense of extreme sadness that there is an amendment from the administration to my motion, a motion which is simply asking for an error to be put right immediately. Surely all members would want to put right so grievous a wrong as soon as possible. By referring the matter back to Cabinet, we have more delay, and it gives the impression that politics is coming before compassion, as the amendment praises a council which does not merit praise in this case. For at present, none, and I repeat none, of the war dead from West Drayton, from this monument and in other places, have been given their rightful place in the borough's military history. A sad reflection on us all. Will this issue end up just like before when this matter was brought to our notice in 2015? Will the Cabinet's appropriate action also require that the relatives of these long dead men come forward before their sacrifice is recognised? Will Cabinet appropriate action decide that the 41 men will not be listed alongside their fallen comrades? I very much pray not. Could we not simply recognise that an omission has been made which we need to rectify? For the error was recognised by a very senior officer of this council who stated that, and I quote, "These men should have been included in the book, of course." So our council should in all conscience have recognised this error tonight. For error it was, for this plaque is within a listed medieval church, and all such churches will have memorials of some kind to the fallen. The omission should have been noticed. It was not. So in the year which marks the 100th anniversary of the unveiling of the cenotaph, I ask that the West Drayton fallen be recognised and honoured by way of an addendum to its official book of remembrance by Remembrance Sunday, if at all possible. For why was there the need for Cabinet intervention when the evidence is so overwhelming? This year is the 75th anniversary of the ending of the Second World War, and it should have been a time of national celebration, but this has been overshadowed by the deaths of COVID. So if we do indeed produce a commemorative booklet for our loss of the Second World War, I would kindly suggest that we need to do much, much, much better next time. Any delay in giving respect to these men who richly deserve it does not reflect well on us all, I'm afraid. Rest in peace to the 41, although I'm afraid that your wait for remembrance continues still. I thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No further comment at this stage. I'll comment after the Labour amendment next.
Thank you. So we will now vote on the amendment. Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot, on behalf of the Conservative Group, how does your group vote on the amendment? We agree with the amendment, Madam Mayor. Leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Curling, on behalf of the Labour Group, how does your group vote on the amendment?
The Labour Group abstains on the amendment, Madam Mayor.
If there are any members who wish to vote differently to that indicated by their group leader, please indicate now verbally or via the virtual chat. The amendment has been carried. That now becomes the substantive motion as set out on page 6 of the order of business. I understand, Councillor Mathers, you want to move a further amendment. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Labour Group abstains because we feel that this amendment is needed in order to change the motion that is now before us, to add some humility to the approach of this matter at hand. How we word our motions is really important. It defines the approach we take as a council, how the administration frames himself. It portrays our intentions to our residents as a full council. So therefore, the final version of this motion before us this evening, which is about correcting an error, should contain no self-congratulation written within it. It should contain no party politics written within it. The emotion that we agreed tonight around this issue should be about compassion, humility, and action. And we can do this by simply agreeing to remove the wording as follows. Given the current Conservative administration's enviable record of protecting and promoting heritage in Hillingdon, particularly military history. So by removing this, as the amendment says, we still keep the Cabinet's desired approach, the administrator's desired approach to resolve this issue. And I do, in good faith, hope that it is resolved. But it is unfortunate that the motion has been amended tonight by the Conservative group, because it doesn't reflect the diplomatic and collaborative tones which we've been seeking in order to find a pragmatic way to resolve the issue of the admissions within this council's public record, which promotes and remembers and protects our heritage. The line which I have proposed removed not only makes it party political, but it also distracts from the matter at hand, which is about remembering our local war dead. So I ask that we all agree to this slight amendment to the motion before us in order that we can put self-congratulation aside and concentrate on the matter at hand. Madam Mayor, I move.
Thank you. Councillor Curling.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second and reserve my right.
Councillor Curling, it's best if you come in now, as there's no point in reserving your right. We're going to go straight on to Councillor Saray Puddifoot after. Would you like to speak now?
Point of order, you did call Councillor Bianco on his reserved right to speak.
Sorry, Councillor Curling, if I could explain, the person who seconded and reserved their right would come in just before, in this case, Ray Puddifoot, who would be exercising his right as a reply as a mover of the substantive motion. There are no other speakers before that, so it would be you anyway.
Okay, in that case, I formally second. I have no speech to give. I just formally second the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Saray Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Mathers rightly said, this is about remembering our war dead in this borough, and this is what this council do by and large very well. In 2010, the council published the online Gazetteer of War Memorials. This is the document, it's still online. It includes monuments, statues, memorial tablets, stained glass windows, rolls of honour, and buildings and structures commemorating the fallen of 2 world wars, not just the First War, the Second War as well. On the 16th of June 2011, Cabinet received a report indicating that a further 3 entries should be made in the Gazetteer, and this was agreed. These are being found all the time, hidden away in churches and other places. In March 2018, Cabinet received a further report indicating that the Imperial War Museum had updated the National War Memorials Register, and this resulted in a number of amendments to the Gazetteer. It needed updating to include 12 new entries. The new entries included the altar in St John the Baptist Church in Royal Lane, the Nestle War Memorial, which have been discovered during the works that are going on down in Hayes at the moment, the Book of Remembrance from St Giles Church in Swakeleys Road, and the memorial in St Martin's Church, referred to in the motion, is in the Gazetteer. I think, as Councillor Sweeting or Councillor Duncan did refer to, with a picture of the plaque. Whilst I appreciate that the Gazetteer of War Memorials is published online to facilitate updates as required, as memorials continue to be discovered, it is simply untrue to say that the men commemorated on that church memorial, St Martin's Church Memorial, have been forgotten. And we will cover this again in more detail at a future Cabinet meeting and do the job properly. We will oppose the Labour amendment.
Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do find it extremely unhelpful within the Conservatives' amendment that they have and within the reply from the leader of the council that there is a lack of understanding and humility that actually the wording of this amendment does create a divide and not a cooperative and collaborative approach in resolving this issue. We obviously, as a group, do want to see all remembered, and we understand that Cabinet is, as time goes by, adding with online directories, but we really need to see a change where the work is done when corrections are pointed out, that these are acted on in good time, and it shouldn't take 2 or 3 council meetings for these matters to be drawn and actually worked on by the administration. It's extremely unhelpful to applaud yourself in a motion as an administration when actually there is an error that actually needs an apology. So I would just ask that everybody support this slight amendment that would enable us to realise that there is still work to do when it comes to protecting and promoting the heritage of all within our borough. And that includes those who are awarded and other heritages and histories that we need to tell the story of. And we have seen in recent councils, for example, through the refusal of Black History Month, that heritage has been not protected or promoted in the way that all residents would like to see. So yes, we are proud of our military history, we are proud of our heritage, we are proud of all of those who have given the ultimate sacrifice, but we need to do more to protect and promote heritage of all citizens in this borough, and to spend time, energy and money in detail to ensure that our borough really celebrates the diversity of the heritage that we have.
Thank you. We shall now take a vote on the amendment to the substantive motion. Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot, on behalf of the Conservative Group, how does your group vote on the amendment to the substantive motion?
The group vote against the Labour amendment, Madam Mayor.
Leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Curling, on behalf of the Labour Group, how does your group vote on the amendment to the substantive motion?
The Labour Group votes in favour of the amendment, Madam Mayor.
If there are any other members who wish to vote differently to that indicated by their group leader, please indicate now verbally or via the virtual chat. The amendment has been lost. The substantive motion is carried. That concludes this item. We will now move on to motion 8.2. Councillor Curling.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I would like to offer my sincere condolences to Tashan Daniel's family and friends. The tragic loss of Tashan Daniel's life on the 24th of September last year, just 2 days after his 20th birthday, was one of the most shocking and horrendous events that our borough has seen. A senseless, unprovoked knife attack on a young man who had such a promising life in front of him. I didn't know Tashan or his family, but what I have learned since his death is what an inspirational role model he was. A much-loved young man who had a passion for photography, football and athletics as an aspiring Olympian. I would like to read out a quote from his trainer, Josh, which gives a very clear picture of the sort of young man Tashan was. Tashan was generally known in track and field as a hybrid. He was blessed by nature with excellent athletic qualities. These qualities, to name a few, included high compliant and elastic tendons. He also had extremely high levels of explosive power, which was necessary for his chosen event of 200 metres. Tashan recognised his potential and decided to focus his efforts and immediate future to train full-time, and gave up his full-time job as a photographer to follow his passion to become a world-class sprinter. He met Josh in October 2018 and they began to perfect his craft. This would include a 5-day training schedule, 3 of which were high-intensity track workouts and 2 days of easy, active recovery sessions. He would also visit a sports therapy clinic 2 times a week to get a massage therapy to keep his body at its optimal condition. His aim was to improve on his performance over a 4-year period until he reached the next Olympic Games. In Josh's opinion, Tarshan Daniel was in the 90th percentile of talent range. With good training, nurturing and consistency, the world was his oyster. His mental approach towards both competition and training was that of a future world champion. His attitude towards hard work was nothing less than tenacious. Madam Mayor, that gives us just a small insight into Tarshan's life, who without a doubt was a young man that Hillingdon should be very proud of. His achievements in his short life are inspirational, and he is certainly a role model for other young people to follow. Madam Mayor, I move this motion in the hope that every member of the council can agree that Tarshan is forever remembered and remains a person in Hillingdon. It remains a person that Hillingdon is proud to call their own. I so move, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Particularly moving speech there by Councillor Curling. And I'm sure we'll hear more from our speakers about Tarshan and the wonderful young talented human being that he was. Whilst naming a stadium after Tarshan will be his legacy, I would urge the council to support this motion because it will serve as a legacy that we can build on in his name as an inspiration to all our youngsters. Valuing our youngsters is something that I've mentioned before at council, and I truly believe out of this tragedy that we have an opportunity presented to us where we can help inspire, motivate and educate our children to become young, successful individuals, just as Tarshan was, and we are confident that he would have gone on to be. I'd like to offer my condolences also to the family, and as I'm sure we all do. I'm extremely proud to second this motion, dedicated to his memory, and which would be for decades to come. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Every member of this council is aware of the tragic death of Tarshan Daniel as a victim of knife crime on the 24th of September last year, and I can concur with Councillor Curling in expressing the sympathy of all councillors to Tarshan's family on their sad loss of a talented young man. It's been known for some time that the family had set up an e-petition requesting that consideration be given to renaming Hillingdon Athletic Stadium as the Tarshan Daniel Stadium as a tribute to Tarshan. As Tarshan's family say, to turn a negative event into a positive, that is fully understandable. I had thought for some time that in Hillingdon we could do something more positive as a tribute to and in memory of this fine young man. And I've been keen to discuss this in private with his family for some time, as their input was essential before any public comments were made, and accordingly was awaiting receipt of the petition, which ahead of considering that option would allow the family to look at and consider other opportunities that could be far more beneficial to young aspiring athletes and achievers now and in future years, as well as doing something positive in the fight against knife crime. In view of the Labour Group putting forward the motion ahead of receipt of the family petition, I met with members of Tarshan's family and outlined my ideas and sought their input and opinions. Subsequently, Tarshan's father informed me that the father would prefer the more positive ideas being put forward than having the stadium renamed. Accordingly, at the next cabinet meeting, which happens to be on the anniversary of Tarshan's untimely death, with the agenda reports being published a week earlier, I will outline what the council will do in consultation with Tarshan's family to ensure that something far more positive is achieved in memory of this fine young man, Tarshan Daniel. That is why, Madam Mayor, I'm formally moving this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second and reserve my right.
We will now be debating on the amendment. Councillor Edgington, you are down to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking in support of the motion. Tarshan Daniel was a young man who was a dedicated and talented sprinter. For any young person, commitment to sports training develops not just the physical body, but additionally allows for the person to focus their thoughts on the best aspects of their life. In Tashan's case, this had extended to photography, particularly dealing with subjects within sports. His death last year was such a tragic and distressing incident, one which was random and one which nobody deserves, and not least somebody who had concentrated their efforts in ways that I hope all members of this council can applaud. Naming the stadium after him can be a memorial, a way for future athletes to be made aware of his achievements, and a permanent reminder of the cruel consequences of knife crime. I accept that this is only a gesture, one which the council could arrange tonight. However, I hope that we can all agree that more needs to be done to support the objects of the charity established by his family. I therefore ask all members of the council to support this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Lakmana, I'd just like to remind you we are discussing the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Speech is charged with tremendous power. When through speech we communicate to a person something that upsets their balance or shocks them into grief, the words completely drain off their physical strength and mental courage. The person falls on the ground, mentally unable to stand their ground. On the other hand, when through speech we communicate something happy or unexpectedly cheering, the person gets the strength of an elephant. This is exactly what Tash and Daniel's family are doing. Although having lost their loved one so tragically, the Daniel family have put all their energy into saving other young people and have been working on the Tash and Daniel campaign to stop knife crime. They have received a huge amount of support from the Hillingdon community, which was visible by the turnout at the Hillingdon station a couple of days after this tragedy. I know that the family are very grateful and appreciative of the support. I therefore wholeheartedly support this motion on renaming the Hillingdon Athletic Stadium to commemorate the very tragic loss of a very young life. Tashan was an inspiring young man who tragically lost his life in an unprovoked attack. May his soul rest in peace. The renaming of the stadium will be a sign of borough-wide respect for Tashan and indeed his whole family, who even through their tragic loss are working for the good of the community. I am therefore humbled that we all stand united with this motion and fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bianco.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Curling. Councillor Curling, you are on mute at the moment.
Apologies, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Labour Group will be accepting this amendment as a friendly amendment. The purpose of bringing this motion to council was to get the whole council united around the wishes of Tashan's family. And we very much welcome the direct dialogue that has opened up between the family and the leader of the council, Sir Ray Puddifoot. If things can be done that make things more positive, and if things can be done to ensure that knife crime is tackled in a more efficient way, as well as Tashan's name being remembered, then we are all for that. One thing that I would ask for assurances of are that whatever is done Tarshan's memory is within the borough in perpetuity, because if the stadium is renamed, it will be the Tarshan Daniel Stadium for many generations to come, which will mean in generations' time, people will still be asking who was Tarshan Daniel, and his memory will be alive in perpetuity. So as long as there is some sort of way of ensuring that Tarshan is remembered in perpetuity, I'm perfectly happy to accept the amendment. And as I say, the wishes of the family are paramount, and I think it's something that we can all support, and as one united council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Saray Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I actually apologise to the family of Tashan for this matter being dealt with in this manner, and assure them that we are in both parties trying to do the best here. And as Tashan's family rightly say, we can turn a negative event into a positive, and we as a council will deliver a fitting tribute to a wonderful young man and comply with the family's wishes, details of which we will announce, but at a time of the family's choosing. I have also agreed that with Tashan's father. I have nothing further to say, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We shall now go to the vote on the amendment. Leader of the Council, Councillor Saray Puddifoot, on behalf of the Conservative Group, how does the group vote on the amendment?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, what are we voting on now? Are we voting on my amendments?
Your amendment.
Yes, the Conservative Group agree with the amendment, my amendment, yes.
Leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Curling, on behalf of the Labour Group, how does your group vote on the amendment?
The Labour Group votes in favour of the amendment, Madam Mayor.
If there are any members who wish to vote differently to that indicated by their group leader, please indicate now verbally or via the virtual chat. The amendment has been carried. I will take it that the substantive motion has no further amendments, and so is carried. That concludes the item. That brings us to the end of the ordinary full council meeting. Please do not unmute yourselves while leaving the meeting, as the live stream has not yet been turned off, so what you say may be recorded. I wish you all a pleasant evening, and we'll see you at the next ordinary meeting of the full council on the 19th of November.